State Senator Becca Rausch testified before colleagues on Thursday on her proposed 2020 Vote by Mail Act, which, if enacted, would allow Massachusetts voters the ability to cast ballots by mail in the September 1st state primary and the November 3rd state election. It was one of many topics I discussed with the senator during our weekly interview. Senator Rausch, thank you for joining us again this week. I need to ask you, we are recording this late in the day on Thursday, May 14th. Earlier in the day, you were speaking at a public hearing about the 2020 Vote by Mail Act. Let me ask you, how did it go?
It went great, Peter. I'm really, really proud of this bill. I'm really proud of the work that went into this from so many people on my team and the advocates that we spoke with, and the experts. The bill is a really, really strong bill. It's in fact the only legislation on the table that would automatically deliver ballots right into the hands, directly into the hands of registered voters for both the primary and the general election. We can't wait for this. And frankly, the people of our Commonwealth deserve this.
I'm sure you've seen the memes on social media, corruption. If people are allowed to vote by mail, the White House is dead set against it. And let's face it, this would apply to the presidential election in November as well. How do you counter what those people are saying?
Well, we've talked about this before. Voter fraud is not actually a real thing. It's in fact incredibly rare. And there are a number of provisions in my bill and also in other legislative proposals on the table that address the question of election security and in fact serve to both instill and maintain confidence in the in the integrity of the election. For example, ballot tracking software. That's a new component. We do not have ballot tracking software in this kind of way at the moment. We don't. We do, of course, take care of our existing mail-in ballots, but the kind of volume that we're talking about here is just unprecedented with regard to mailing ballots back to clerks. So making sure that we have comprehensive, robust ballot tracking software, which already exists, we can procure it, and we even have the money to do it. We'll be able to track each of those ballots. We'll know when the voter sent them back, and we'll be able to make sure that those ballots were in fact counted. As to the individual, someone filling out somebody else's ballot, there, at least under my proposal, we still have an affidavit on the back of the envelope indicating what the penalties would be for engaging in voter fraud. It is still a criminal offense. My bill does nothing to change that. And in fact, we again have mail-in voting for absentee ballots already with really no issue. So I think we'll be okay.
Two questions about your proposal. Would cities and towns still be able to hold or host polling places where people could physically vote?
Absolutely. We do maintain in-person voting. And we also recognize the gravity of the public health crisis that we're in. So we did provide for PPE, personal protective equipment for poll workers. I certainly support a related proposal from someone else to provide cleaning supplies. And we also allowed in our bill to not reduce the number of polling locations, but so long as the operations of the election can be maintained, the opportunity for local clerks in conjunction with the secretary to reduce the number of poll workers. So the number of poll workers is actually set in statute right now. So we would have to change that in order to reduce that number. But that's really important to have in the mix of options for all of our towns and cities in terms of reducing crowds at polling places, which is, of course, the whole point.
As someone who has had to do a tap dance on election night during a live cable cast, waiting for the results to come in, how much would this delay the results? Would we be in a situation like we were in Iowa where it's days before we know the result?
I actually think it might make the results come in faster. I mean, there was a local election in Michigan where 98% of the people who voted did so by mail. That's massive. So currently, the way the law currently reads, for all those mail-in ballots, the clerks have to wait until election day to feed those through the counting machines. But my bill would change that particular problem. I've heard a lot of concerns and complaints from clerks saying that that just does not work. Because they get this tremendous backlog and they have to store all of the ballots safely and securely in advance of even feeding them through the machine. And you do get that backlog. That certainly was relevant for me in 2018, as you point out. But in my 2020 Vote by Mail Act, the bill provides an opportunity for clerks to count the ballots as they come in, not tabulate them. Right? None of the tabulation happens until the end when you close out the election. So that wouldn't happen until the usual course, right? Election day or perhaps the wee hours of the morning thereafter. But giving clerks the opportunity to actually feed those ballots through the tabulation machines as they come in, rather than stacking them all up and having to feed them all through on election day, might actually get us results earlier.
I like it already. I'll be home earlier on election night, that's for sure. The
Yeah,
big news,
right.
the big news, of course, this week, Governor Baker announced that he does have a 4-phase plan to reopen the Commonwealth, details of which will be unveiled Monday during his daily press conference. I mean, you're in the know. You must know what the plan is, right?
Oh, I wish, Peter. I would even sort of hesitate to say what we've seen is actually a plan. I think what we've seen so far is an overview, sort of a statement of values, and some really important words associated with those values that indicate, sort of where the governor and his reopening advisory board are thinking in terms of how a plan might be formulated. So we've got this overview, and the overview is important. I'm glad to see a number of people, including the governor, talking about this being a truly data-driven approach. We've seen, we saw sort of a decline of the number of cases of COVID-19 toward the end of last week, but just the last 2 days, we've actually seen a steady increase. I think it's pretty clear that we still don't have a handle on COVID-19, on transmission, on testing and related supplies, or on treatment. So we do need to be very careful here.
Overnight, Wednesday night, the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled that the stay-at-home orders preventing businesses from opening were illegal. And I turned on the news this morning and I saw all these people crowding in at bars, drinking right on top of each other. My first thought was, what the hell is wrong with you people? My second thought was, could someone challenge that and the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court have to make a ruling?
Yeah, that's possible. Sure, it's possible. Someone could file a lawsuit. Right, all of this is a balancing act. I mean, all of legislating is a balancing act to begin with, all of governing. I think the risk calculations are all different now, right? I mean, even each of us in our individual lives are calculating risk differently, even doing something as familiar as going to the grocery store. So yes, sure, I suppose somebody could file a suit and have the Supreme Judicial Court issue a ruling on it. But we are inherently balancing all of the various issues at play here. And I think it's really, really important as we continue to make those balancing decisions and choices, as people and also as a governing body, that we center the people who have been disenfranchised from our systems the most, right? Single parents, communities of color, immigrants, people who are generally living, at the poverty line, or in some cases dramatically below the poverty line, people experiencing homelessness, people living with disabilities that are not provided appropriate accommodations, right? I mean, we have lots of people who should be central to any of these decision-making processes.
Earlier in our newscast, we heard from the town of North Attleboro's public health nurse, Anne Marie Fleming, stating that she's observed about 2 out of every 3 people following the governor's guidelines about wearing masks in public.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to the people who just will not do it?
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a better response to that question. I think that's really unfortunate. To your comment earlier about the naysayers, I had someone said something to me in some social media platform that effectively amounted to, well, if you're upset and you're worried, then you take precautions. And I thought, well, we have this thing called public health, and that's not quite how public health works, right? Which is why there's such a tremendous amount of focus on testing and transmission and figuring out how this infectious disease functions. It's also why, the work that I had done previously in this session, and continue to work to advance, although it's certainly not the height of mind at the moment, but that previous work and ongoing work to create comprehensive infectious disease prevention policy at the state level, which we really don't have. I filed that bill much earlier in the session. Certainly didn't expect a pandemic to be forthcoming, and yet here we are, and that bill has become more important than ever.
I'll tell you what I tell people when I see them without wearing a mask. I say, property values in Georgia are very low. You could get a great house down in Georgia.
Well, that's a good point. But I think there's also, I certainly see people without masks on, and I just want to remind everybody that the rule is when you cannot maintain that 6 feet of physical distancing, that's when you need to be wearing a mask. So if you're out, in a place where you're likely to be able to make that 6 feet of distance happen, technically you don't need a mask.
Final question before I ask you what you would like to talk about. Much made about Mitch McConnell's statements about bailing out blue states. Let's face it, states across the country, blue, red, are in an economic downfall right now because they're not getting sales taxes, property taxes, and other taxes are delayed. Cities and towns, I mean, the town of North Attleboro, for example, is budgeting 10% less from the state, 20% less from the state, 30% less from the state. From what you hear in the Senate, is there any likelihood that states, not only Massachusetts, but across the country, might get some federal help?
I hope so. There's certainly conversation about it. You rightly point out we are in a very serious deficit, right? Our revenue shortfall is very significant. That stems in part, at least in our state, from the delay of the income tax filing date. Those revenues that usually come in or would have otherwise come in fiscal year 20 by pushing the return date back to July, they're not going to come in until the next fiscal year. So we have and the shortfall, even absent that particular component for fiscal 21, is estimated to be around $6 billion, and out of a roughly $44 billion budget, that's a big chunk. So we really do need those federal dollars to come in. We need them to come in quickly. We need them to be readily accessible to North Attleboro and Plainville, of course, but all of the towns and cities in the Commonwealth. We didn't really get that in the CARES Act. I believe Congresswoman Catherine Clark, recently filed a bill at the federal level that would address this. There's certainly conversations happening among the federal delegation and also at the state level with regard to those federal dollars that we just sorely need to make sure that we can continue to function and provide all the governmental benefits that we need to provide for the people that we represent.
And then finally, what would you like to leave viewers with? I know you have a phone number. I almost know it by heart now, and an email address.
Well, the sun is out. That's nice. Have you gone to the golf course? Let's talk about whether, the really important crux of things. Yes, you have.
Yes, I have.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
I have a tee time on Saturday, although it's been a while since I've actually walked. So that was a challenge.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. And you can't drive around in the cart either. Just sending strength, health, and resilience out to everybody. We're still in this. I know I'm still focused on early education and childcare, especially as we approach the summer. That's a huge concern. Summer camps, summer canceling, summer staying open. We don't have anything from the state with regard to a rule specifically about summer camps. But that is obviously top of mind for many people in our district, and certainly top of mind for me as well. in addition to the the work that is of course ongoing on election reform, making sure people can vote. I do want to give everybody a resource for your upcoming local elections. You can vote by mail in your upcoming local election. Expanded that opportunity. You can go to BeccaRauschMA.com/VBM local, vote by mail local. Again, that's VBM local. The application is there. The information about all of the local elections in our district, that's there. Information for your local town clerks, that's there. So please do use that as a resource. Please do everything you can to maintain your physical distancing, and also try to do some things that support your physical and emotional health and well-being. It's real challenging. This is not getting any easier. Earlier this week, we put out I think our 19th COVID-19 update, which was phenomenal to me that we're already at 19. But it did include a whole bunch of links to free exercise classes and 30-day yoga and stuff like that. So check it out. Get outside. Don't forget your face mask. Don't forget to wash your hands, of course. And just so you can hear the phone number one more time, please do call if you need anything, 617-722-1555. You can email me directly at becca.rausch@masenate.gov, and also visit the website, BeccaRauschMA.com. And we will have I've lost track of how many virtual office hours we've done so far, but I believe they will be next Friday, as usual, 10 to 12. You can sign up for a 15-minute slot right on the website. Whether your issue or concern or worry is about COVID-19 or otherwise, please do sign up. It's, serving constituents is the most important thing that I do.